Hi, it's Ray Grant. It is Wednesday, December 6th, 2023. It is 9:42 p.m. Here in Pittsburgh. I wanted to mention something that that I misspoke at the end of the last video. I was talking about this idea that this is the problem when you don't make notes for for a presentation, I guess. I was talking about what happens when why the two victims, Donna Lass in 1970 and Joan Webster in 1981, were both buried by the Zodiacs in Chinatowns. Let me see if I can. This was the general idea. This is what the Mount Diablo radiant looks like. And Donna Lass would be, let's put it this way. It would look like this. This is basically what it looks like. There are pictures of this in my book. This is the Mount Diablo radiant up here, VABM 3849. This is benchmark 54. It's 739 Clay Street. This is the south leg of the radiant. This is Portsmouth Square Park, which is directly across the street from 739 Clay Street. Now, this is down below here. Remember, I'm your artist here, so it's not going to be, it isn't going to be remotely close to scale here, but this is Clay Street. This is the intersection of Clay Street and Kearny Street in San Francisco. This is Kearny Street. 739 Clay Street, let's say, is there. Portsmouth Square Park is across the street and takes up this city block here. As you come down to the light, you make a left on Kearny Street. I don't know if one or the other is a one-way. Kearny isn't a one-way street. I don't know whether Clay Street is or not. But on Kearny Street or Portsmouth Square garage doors. I think if you go to Google Maps and go to, I don't know, maybe 709 Kearny Street, something like that. It's Kearny Street in San Francisco in Chinatown. The garage is here. The grass lot to the left of the garage doors is right here. As far as I know, has not been disturbed since 1970, although the park itself has been, resurfaced, things have been moved around inside the park. But the plaque that dedicates the eastern terminus of the cable car system and Andrew Halliday, there's a picture of that in my book, is right here above where the garage doors are, on a level above where the garage doors are, and the grass lot would be right here. There's also a grass lot to the right of the doors. It's possible Donna Lass is buried there. But I believe she is buried here, and she would be possibly would be susceptible to a GPR scan if one were done over there. And as I said, it would take 20 minutes with a GPR machine. Okay. The burial position in Greater Boston would have looked like this. It would be this triangle, 12, 22, 146, the MIT Tower here, the Liberty Mutual building here, where the 146 is, and where the 22 is benchmark 12, which is Nealon Street 993. And this, I believe, part of that has been obliterated by the Big Dig, but this is what it looked like in 1989. And I'm not sure exactly. I have pictures of the benchmark end of the lot, but in Boston, the benchmark, the disc is over here, and then there's what is usually referred to as a postage stamp. We have a small front lawn. We have a small back lawn in our house here. We have myself and the owners of the other side of our duplex. We get landscaping. The landscapers were here today. They just did what's known as the fall cleanup, where they come and they suck up all the leaves. I think the trees are bare now. I'm not sure, but I hope they are, because I hope there aren't. I think the landscapers are done, so I hope there aren't any more leaves to come down. Anyway, The the uh, the small grass lot would have been the BM12 would have been here. This again is kind of a detail of what's here. The BM12 disc benchmark disc would have been here. Then there was a relatively small grass lot next to it, and the entrance to I-93 would have been here. So I guess this would have been Neeland. Let me write Neeland here. Neeland Street 993. So this is it's generally what the specific open ground looked like, which I say in both cases was a burial spot for the Zodiacs. Now, the mistake that I made at the end of the video, I start rambling. Sometimes, and I was rambling about why the two victims would have been buried in Chinatown, and I tried to make the point that I talked about Ed Neal saying that China's in the northern hemisphere, and so is the United States. So the idea being that if you have a northern hemisphere and a southern hemisphere, anything that starts down through the earth, let's say this is San Francisco, or it could be Boston, and it goes down through the center of the earth, it's going to end up coming out in the southern hemisphere. And the same thing with let's say this is SF, let's say this is Boston. If it goes down through the center of the earth, it's going to come out in the southern hemisphere. And I pointed out that that's correct, but we're talking about the cultural idea of what's on the other side of the world. And we have the movie The China Syndrome. We have, I think people sometimes say you could dig all the way to China. In other words, the idea being that what's on the other side, if you dig deep enough, is China. Well, I mean, it wouldn't be China for the reason that Ed points out. It would be some spot in the southern hemisphere and probably underwater in the southern hemisphere. But in pop culture, it would be China. Okay, and the reason what I forgot to mention is that what happens I mentioned that Dante's Inferno is part of what the Zodiacs were basing some of their cultural references on. The idea that, for example, the opening quatrain of Dante's Inferno, midway in my life's journey, I awoke to find myself alone in a dark wood. When I was midway in my life's journey, I strayed from the straight path and awoke to find myself alone in a dark wood, is the same thing as cut, clean, if read, clean. It's the same ideas in both. One, the death poem is a paraphrase of the opening quatrain of Dante's Inferno, and the confession letter being in all caps is modeled on the gates of hell. The first thing you see of hell in Dante's Inferno are the gates of hell, where it says, for example, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. That's all of that quotation I don't know that it is in all caps in the original Italian. It is invariably translated into all caps. If you're looking at a side by side translation of Dante's Inferno, original Italian and modern English, the English is always going to be in all caps of the inscription on the gates of hell. Okay, well, if you follow the structure of Dante going through hell in Dante's Inferno, they enter hell, and hell is a series of concentric circles, which I don't think I'm even going to. There are 9 circles of hell. Let me see if I can draw something that looks remotely like that. I doubt it, but anyway, imagine that these are concentric circles. When you get to the 9th circle and you reach where the devil is, at the end of Dante's Inferno, Virgil and Dante then climb up the devil's body through the center of the earth, okay, and then come out apparently in the southern hemisphere. Now, at the end of course, Dante would have been writing actually in the 14th century, because although Dante's Inferno occurs in the year 1300, which is the last year of the 13th century, he would have been writing the poem for, I guess, in somewhere in the time between 1301 and when he died in 1322. So he would have been writing in the 14th century. But the point to be made here is that despite this idea that people prior to Columbus believed that the earth was flat, most educated people believed that the earth was a sphere, okay? And Dante clearly believed that the earth was a sphere. And the idea was that if you came, in other words, if you went through hell and you started through hell and got down through the 9th circle, you would then come out in the southern hemisphere, and he comes out on Sunday morning. Now, exactly where they are geographically on Sunday morning, I'm not sure. I think they're in the vicinity of the gates of purgatory or something. I haven't read the last 2 parts of the Divine Comedy. I've just read parts of Dante's Inferno. The parts that I thought were significant to the Zodiacs. And the idea being that when you come up out of hell, you will come up on the other side of the world, because you're going down through the center of the earth. You're going down through hell, through the 9 circles of hell. You climb up through the devil's body. Dante and Virgil climb up the devil's body through the center of the earth, and they come out presumably on the other side of the earth. And for the Zodiacs, that was Chinatown. So the reason, because in cultural terms, China is on the other side of the earth, although it actually isn't in real terms. But let me try that again. Just so we can read that here. China is what you come through after the trip through hell. So the idea being that once the Zodiac project is over with, that the 2 buried victims, who are Donna Lass in beside the garage doors in Portsmouth Square Park, and Joan Webster next to benchmark 12, consecrating benchmark 12, sanctifying the USGS benchmark, the boundary stone. And in the terminus triangle, where the 22 is of the 1222, you will come up out of here in China. Okay. So fittingly, they buried the two victims in Chinatown with the idea being that you will get to those victims, you will find those two bodies on the other end, on the other side of the world, because you've gone through hell to get there, literally. Well, figuratively. So that's what the idea was. I did not do a very good job of explaining it at the end of the Donald last video, my last video. I didn't do a very good job of explaining that. So that's and I hadn't been. That's basically what happens when you don't prepare. Is I forgot what the reasoning was behind burying the two victims in Chinatown, but that's what the reasoning was. It's the idea that on Sunday morning at the end of the inferno, you will come up out of the earth, and after the terminus event has happened, after you've been put through hell, you will come up on the other side of the earth, which will be China, and you will find the two buried bodies in Chinatown. Okay, so that's what the idea was. Okay, so that brings us up to date, by the way. I had a poster ask me, what did the poster? I had a poster ask me, let me those were, or the trip. She was cooperating in her own. But I didn't think it would take very long for me to get to O'Hare. And target shooting for over 20. Oh, this was asked by River Prawn Pottery 6137. Ray, honest question: are you open to your theory being incorrect? Okay. I honestly don't know how to answer that, because everything is based upon the same set of assumptions that I'm making. So I don't know exactly what it would mean for my theory to be incorrect. It's kind of like, let me see if I can. I hate to keep picking on Dave like this, but he leaves himself open to it. That's the problem. Let me see, Dave Aranchek.
Which is how long a cipher has to be before it is guaranteed to reproduce the message by going through the same decryption steps we described in episode 5. But a few people still expressed doubts because we had to manipulate the cipher before the message could be fully recovered. First, he rewrote the cipher based on a simple diagonal reading scheme.
Talking about Z340.
2 adjustments to the second section to make it decode properly. Finally, we had to reverse some words in the third section to finalize the solution. I've seen other solution attempts that turned out to be wrong, where people go through several steps to make messages appear. So, why is ours right and theirs wrong? I think the main reason is because our manipulations are very limited and don't add significant information to the decoding process. The steps are simple and systematic, familiar to people who study cryptography, and result in an understandable 340 character long message. The chances are extremely low that so few manipulations would result in such a long, coherent message that just happens to be wrong. Many other solutions I've seen require a lot of information to be added to the solving process, or generate a lot of ambiguous messages that can have many interpretations. Where people go through several steps to make messages appear. So, why is ours right and theirs wrong? I think the main reason is because our manipulations are very limited and don't add significant information to the decoding process. The steps are simple and systematic, familiar to people who study cryptography, and result in an understandable 340 character long message. The chances are extremely low that so few manipulations would result in such a long, coherent message that just happens to be wrong. Many other solutions I've seen require a lot of information to be added to the solving process, or generate a lot of ambiguous messages that can have many interpretations. They relax too many. The chances are extremely low that so few manipulations would result in such a long, coherent message that just happens to be wrong. Many other
Yeah, I like Dave's reasoning there. It's basically the idea that, first of all, if you go back through my videos or if you read my book, what you find is that I start with the evidence, okay, and then go to I go through the evidence and demonstrate that what the Zodiac killers were doing was moving people around on the landscape, just as I say they're doing with the conceptual art project. Okay, they are moving victims around on the landscape, and in some cases, burying them so that they'll be found later on. In China, in effect. Okay, so it seems to me that it would be awfully difficult to keep that up, where I'm able to demonstrate through fairly direct operations, for example, how pi converts to an anagram of Zodiac, how please rush to editor converts to Michael O'Hare's social security number, or within 8 of the 9 digits of Michael O'Hare's social security number. We don't know, which would narrow it down to 10 people. Or if you want to start at the beginning, that would be another 10 people. So one of 20 people would have that social security number, theoretically. Again, I don't know I don't know that it would necessarily be 20. It might only be 10. Who could, in theory, have that social security number. And my guess is we could eliminate the other 9 or the other 19 without any significant difficulty. We know that Michael O'Hare has one of those social security numbers that would fit that please rush to editor idea that I demonstrated. And we know that he was living and working in San Francisco at the time during the Zodiac murders, and we know that that he looks like the sketch, as many of us do. Okay, and we know that he has exactly the type of background. He was a member of the Harvard rifle team, for example, in 1960. Okay, and he is certainly smart enough to pull something like this off. If you watch the Sherlock Holmes episode with Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce, Terror by Night, which after Dress to Kill is probably my second favorite of that series. One of the points that Sherlock Holmes makes at the end of the movie is when he's talking about Colonel Sebastian Moran, where he has that little misdirection at the end of the movie. I don't want to spoil it for anybody because it's a great movie. You should go on YouTube and maybe even stop watching this for a minute. Go on YouTube and watch Terror by Night because it's a great movie. Um, but one of the things that Sherlock Holmes points out in that movie at the end of the movie is this is a very clever ploy that he pulls right at the end of his operation, and it's the type of thing that would be worthy of Colonel Sebastian Moran. Okay, and if Michael O'Hare and Berta Margolis and Gareth Penn and you Penn were to create a puzzle, it would be something like this. This is not the sort of thing that you would put together. Two drinking buddies would put together at on a bar somewhere. This is a construction that required a great deal of forethought by very bright people. Okay, and we know that both Gareth Penn and Michael O'Hare are extremely bright people. Okay, so it's the assumptions that I make are logical, based upon who I'm accusing, and based upon the evidence that's there. So that it would be strange that I've been able to. It would be an amazing coincidence, for example, that the three angles of the terminus triangle, 12, 22, 146, just happened to find themselves in Michael O'Hare's address on August the 11th, 1989. That would be an amazing coincidence. It's amazing that someone like myself was able to put together a theory, and I'm able to zone in on details like that seem to fit the pattern. Okay, and for example, that according to Gareth Penn, the watch that was dropped by Sherry Bates's body at the crime scene was stopped at 12:22, and that just happens to be the clock time for the border between California and Nevada, which is apexed at Lake Tahoe, which is where Donna Lass was abducted and presumably murdered. So that all of these details seem to dovetail seems awfully convincing to me. And as Dave said, it would be odd that something that was this elaborate that I can create a scenario this elaborate that just happens to be wrong. Okay, I don't think it's wrong. The other thing I would point out before I talk about Joan Webster is that a lot of people are going to come forward and say, I don't think human beings are capable of this type of detailed forethought, of being able to plan something like this. Well, first of all, the four human beings, they were extremely bright people. And Berta Margolis was a member of Arts Avant-Garde. She was a member of the New York group, okay? So she was already familiar with people like, for example, Christo, okay? And we've already seen extremely complex criminal activities like September 11th, where the hijackers, who seem like complete idiots to me, frankly, except for the fact that they did have, I think Mohammed Atta did have like an engineering degree. Certainly didn't have the kind of background that Michael O'Hare had. But the people who actually pulled up, not necessarily planned it, but Khalid Sheikh Mohammed doesn't strike me as being particularly. He doesn't as somebody who was a recruiter for Mensa. I'm not sure that I would necessarily expect him to be able to join the club. Okay, and yet he was able to not just pull off the September 11th attacks and conceive of them and execute them, but to be able to look forward and realize that, for example, it would be good for them to assassinate the head of the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan because the weekend prior to the September 11th attacks, because what was going to happen is the United States was probably going to invade Afghanistan if the attacks came off, which they did and which the United States did. So, and they also went to the trouble of having the terrorists take trips on transcontinental flights, so that they would not only would they be familiar with that type of the way the interior demographics, I guess, or whatever the just what it was like to be on a transcontinental flight, but also so that they would know, does this plane like typically make stops on the way? I guess it doesn't. I guess they just go from one end of the one coast to the other. But anyway, they did a lot of planning for the flight. And just today I was looking at this for. Let me see here. Christo's Gates in Central Park, which was originally planned in 1979. It was finally realized in the year 2005. This is after permit applications, court hearings, people who are opposed to the idea that he was going to use Central Park. The city of New York saying, for example, that the gates that they put up had to be self-contained. For example, they couldn't be attached to anything because the city did not want Christo and his crew drilling into anything. Okay, so when they put the gates up, the gates had to be self-sustained. So, for example, the idea of the gates is taken from the let me see if they have a picture here of what they call Fushimi Inari Shrine in Kyoto, Japan. Thousands of torii gates line the passes of the celebrated Fushimi Inari Shrine. So what they did was based upon previous cultural artifacts. And same thing with the Zodiac case. Okay, what the Zodiacs did was based upon cultural artifacts like the Sign Z story by Edwin Baird, and like the Midnight Murders in Texarkana, and Charles Starkweather, and In Cold Blood, and Leopold and Loeb by Rope. Okay, so all of those things led up to the Zodiac Project. And if you look at let's see. Project was officially launched on February 12, 2005, when Michael Bloomberg dropped the first piece of fabric at 8:30 a.m. Let's see what they have. More than 100 teams of 8 workers, all wearing gray uniform smocks, began erecting the gates and bolting them to the base plates. That was February 7th, 2005. Installation began on February 13th, 2004. During the week of March 17th, Central Park was filled with workers using forklifts to move the rectangular steel plates into position. The artist said the project cost $21 million. Let me see. According to the artist, the work used 5,390 tons of steel, 315,491 feet of vinyl tubing, 99,155 square meters of fabric, and 15,000 sets of brackets and hardware. The textile was produced and sewn in Germany. The gates were assembled in a 25,000 square foot Long Island facility, then trucked to Central Park. And there were, let me see, was dismantled. There were 7,503 vinyl gates along, coincidentally, 23 miles, 37 kilometers of pathways in Central Park in New York City. The exhibit ran from February 12th through February 27th, 2005. That's all of that you can read about in the gates in Central Park in Wikipedia. The point being that obviously that is a much more complex project than what the Zodiac project was. Now, the Zodiac project had its complex details. For example, Z340, the cipher grid transposition, and so forth. But most of what was done in the Zodiac project was relatively simple. I mean, you tend to stand back and think, okay, they kidnapped a victim in Riverside. They kidnapped victims on Lake Herman Road. They abducted Donna Lass. They abducted and murdered Shelley Holmbo. They abducted Donna Lass and buried her in Chinatown. They abducted Joan Webster and buried her in Chinatown in Boston. But comparatively, if you were just walked through what they did in Riverside, basically what they did was they picked Sherry Bates as one of their possible victims. They abducted her. They kept her in a car somewhere. They went in and charged books out on her student ID. They pulled the wire from the distributor in her car, probably after they killed her, and murdered her. Okay. On Lake Herman Road, they abducted the two teenagers, kept them in a car in the holding area, and waited for the right time and so that to make sure that the gate number 10 turnout was available to them. Then drove the Rambler. At most they would have had perhaps to use a bolt cutter or wire cutter to create a driveway where the holding area was so that they could pull off. And again, the ground would have been frozen that night, so it would have been basically like driving on asphalt, or not that different from it. The actual logistics of the crimes and even of the letters were certainly not on the level of the gates in Central Park, and only involved 4 people as opposed to at least hundreds, if not thousands, of people in the gates. And although the gates was a relatively recent project by Christo. Christo was doing things along those lines much earlier in his career, and I believe his first public project was like in 1962, something like that, and certainly not on the level of the gates in Central Park, but these tend to be. Michael Heiser, a double negative. He went out into the desert, Nevada, and used a backhoe to create these huge trenches. And if you see the actual pictures of the trenches that he created, they're monumental. Okay, so yes, this was a major project, but it's basically in keeping with what conceptual artists did. Um, and again, there's quite a bit of opposition to this sort of thing done publicly. But as Christo pointed out, that all of that was part of the artistic process. So any issues that the Zodiacs ran into with the police investigations, or people like Ray Grant, for example, sending books to Harvard after in the aftermath of the non-event of the Terminus event. That's all in keeping with what they were doing. So it's the sort of thing that Christo would just shrug his shoulders at and say that's essentially what we're doing, and that's part of the process. So I'm going to move on now to. I hope that answers the question. Can I imagine? Can I imagine being wrong? No, I can't. I didn't spend 38 years getting to this point. Although, frankly, I was at this point in 1989, 1990, and I just added a lot of detail to it when I saw the police reports and I was being criticized by people on Mike Butterfield's board that I didn't address the actual crimes themselves. So, and Ed Neal took me to task for that. You always start with the evidence, and I thought, okay, fine, I'll read the police reports and I'll tell you what I think. And when I started reading the police reports, it just occurred to me, well, I don't think Sherry Bates was ever in the RCC library. If nobody saw her in there that night, and there were 65 people, 65 potential witnesses, and nobody saw her, my guess is she wasn't there. Okay. If the two teenagers on Lake Herman Road weren't seen by any reliable witnesses, I don't consider Peggy Ure to be reliable. Um, where were they? They were somewhere. Okay. They weren't murdered until they were placed in the turnout. So I just said, well, if there's a white Chevy Impala there that shouldn't be there, and that person, whoever was driving that car, hasn't come forward, that looks suspicious to me. Okay, um, so all of that, I think leads me to where I am, and as I said, one of the ways that a defense attorney defends his client in a criminal investigation, when a prosecutor creates a case theory and says we believe the defendant, got this gun and went and shot. Let's assume that the case to be made is entirely circumstantial, that they don't have any forensic matches, but they have a good solid circumstantial case that the defendant uh, murdered the victim. In that instance, all the defense attorney has to do is to present an alternative version of the case theory, wherein the defendant doesn't isn't guilty of the murder, where something else could have happened. Okay, and again, I keep waiting for my opponents on Zodiac message boards, the people who keep calling me crazy, for example, they keep posting on my the same people who are calling me crazy or leaving posts on my YouTube videos, which I don't understand. I mean, if you think I'm crazy, why are you wasting your life posting on my videos? Why are you going anywhere near my videos? I don't get it, but I guess it makes sense to them. See, that sounds crazy to me, doing something like that. But as I said, it makes sense to them. But As soon as I get some sort of plausible, I just had this guy on well, let me do this. Let me see if I can get. It's the information given by the investigator. Okay, videos. Okay, Lake Herman Road. Okay, here's what this guy says on my this guy is Caratos. Okay, this is from like a week and a half ago. The evidence points to a simple conclusion. Two teenagers on their first date together went off to find some privacy, eventually parking on the side of the road. A short time later, around 11:15 p.m., a second vehicle pulled up beside them, and a man with a flashlight got out telling them to get out of their vehicle too. Likely assuming it was the police, they both exited the vehicle on the passenger side. Likely moments later, David was shot point blank in the head. Betty Lou understandably began to run and was shot in the back as she ran. Fine. I mean, if the evidence points to that simple conclusion, then you're good to go, and you've defended your client, who is the sad little man theory, and you can now leave the courtroom with the thanks of the judge. Here's the problem. You can't actually create that case theory, okay, in any detail, with any citing of actual evidence. That's the problem. The evidence points to a simple conclusion. No. The evidence points to a much more complex reality, okay? And that's what it is. And that's the reason, by the way, you're watching this video. The reason you are watching this video is that the evidence points to a more complex conclusion than what this guy professes to believe. I shouldn't say he believes it. He professes to believe it, okay? If that were true, if the evidence were not backing me up, people would not be watching these videos. When I wrote my book, as Ned DeHaan pointed out, the book consists of 21 chapters, and the first 12 are all about the evidence. And then I start into the terminus triangle and things like that, and what I see behind the evidence, okay, or the overarching motive for what they were doing, okay. But the evidence points to what I say it points to, which is more than one killer, and it points to the victims being moved around on the landscape. Okay, there's and as I said, the only reason people are watching my videos, and the only reason I'm having some success, I mean, who just posted a video recently? Somebody. I'm trying to think offhand. I can't remember, but somebody else who posts videos. Well, Ken Maines posts. If you go to Ken Mains's channel, and again, I agree with Ken on a lot of the things that he says, and I find his videos to be very interesting. But I'm lucky if I hit 100. If I hit 100 views in the first 24 hours for any of my videos, that's cause for celebration. Okay, I may end up. I don't know what I have here. Let me see. Okay, 533 views for a month-old video. I'm actually over 1,000 on the Lake Herman Road video, but that's it. Everything else is in the hundreds. And once I stop talking about I have like over 500 videos for all of the videos on the canonical murders. I'm over 500 views. Once you get past those, where I'm just talking about the Zodiac project, well, some of them are over 500, but you're talking about um, you're talking about views in the lower, less than 500 views. So um, I am less popular and less watched than most people who post videos about the Zodiac killer case. But still, I appear to have a somewhat devoted following now compared to what I've had like in previous years. And I think when I originally had my website up, I was getting like maybe 20 visits per day, something like that. I think like somewhere between 20 and 100 per day, something like that. And that's back when ZodiacKiller.com, like in circa 2010, 2011, ZodiacKiller.com and Mike Butterfield's website were getting like 1 million views per month or more than that. I mean, in the wake of the Fincher movie, they were getting multi-million views. Tom Voigt once told me, I said, how many views are you getting per month? And Tom said, I don't actually look at that stuff anymore because we got so many views in the immediate aftermath of the Fincher movie. That's kind of depressing that we've come so far down from where that was. But again, it's the same syndrome as with Dave Aranchek, where he does the Z340 solve, and that gets 2 million views, and you would think that episode 6 would get 1 million anyway, and it's back down in, I guess, into the lower 6 digits. So, but I mean, people have a kind of voyeuristic interest in knowing who the Zodiac killer was. If the explanation gets too detailed, I think it kind of it turns them off, and then you run into the situation where it's like the more content you're giving them, the less interest they have in it. They want the 2 or 3 minute version, and uh, their attention spans tend to be very short. So, but it's encouraging that I'm getting more views than I normally get. Let me see where we are as far as I may just go with I'm going to talk about the collateral killing. I guess I might do Joan Webster as the next video instead of doing it tonight. Let me. Okay, yeah, I might just do that because I'm going to talk about James Scarlett here. Okay. This is chapter 10 of my book, Collateral Killing. Okay, I just talked about Joan Webster and Donald asked Joan Webster. I haven't actually talked about Joan Webster in detail yet. Okay, collateral killing. The reader may have noticed that my list of murder victims of the Zodiacs includes one James Scarlett, who I have referred to as a collateral casualty. I believe that the Zodiacs set a brush fire in Napa to consecrate their murders in the Bay Area, just as happened in the wake of the Kathleen Johns kidnapping. Although Kathleen Johns was not murdered. I believe that the Zodiacs set a brush fire in Napa to consecrate their murders in the Bay Area on Monday, June 22nd, 1981. This event has been called the Atlas Peak Fire. If they set that fire, they likely set similar fires in Riverside and Greater Boston, since they also committed murders in those places. The most likely candidate for such a fire in Riverside occurred 4 days earlier, a massive brush fire in Riverside County that was set by an arsonist on Thursday, June 18, 1981. The fire was destructive enough to be covered in an article in the New York Times, as was the Atlas Peak fire, and 6-year-old James Scarlett perished in Riverside. A major fire was also set in Lynn, Massachusetts, and Greater Boston on the very morning of Joan Webster's abduction, Saturday, November 28, 1981. I can't prove that the Zodiacs were the arsonists in all three fires, but I suspect they were. I will discuss this angle on the case in Chapter 18. I talked to, back in, I guess, 1989 or 1990, I talked to Daryl Bressler, who is the chief investigator for the state of California. And we were talking about the Atlas Peak fire. He was surprised that I thought that the Atlas Peak fire had been set by the Zodiac killers. And this would have, the other thing to remember is that the statute of limitations would have run out already on prosecuting anybody. I think the statute of limitations is maybe, the general statute of limitations for most crimes in California is 6 years. The limit is 6 years. The only way that the limit is longer than that is if it's, a capital crime like, murder, I guess kidnapping also, and maybe one or two other things. But for even for an arson as significant as the Atlas Peak fire, I believe it was, if it's either three, I think it might be 6 years, it might be 3 years. But Daryl Bressler told me, he said anything that we discuss about the fire obviously is academic, because we can't move on any sort of investigation. There's a limit to how long you can wait to charge somebody. But I pointed out at the time that that Gareth Penn had mentioned let me see if I can get the, oops. Okay. All right, Gareth had mentioned the Atlas Peak fire, and Gareth didn't have an index in his book, so I'm not sure. See, I should have used a bookmark, but okay. Anyway, it's in this book, and if maybe at my next, I made kind of an index for. Let me see if I can. Maybe I can. Let me see if we have this here. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, right here. Oh, page 48. Okay. Okay, here's page 48 of time 17. Nothing continued to happen until 22nd June. On that day, my phone rang at exactly 1:30 p.m. I answered. The caller asked, "Is Jim there?" I said, "No, he must have the wrong number." He replied with a no and hung up. I was struggling with the Zodiac, wadding up one sheet of scratch paper after another and littering the floor with them. It wasn't until about 3 in the afternoon that I paused to look out of the window. The whole eastern side of the mountains ringing the Napa Valley was in flames. There was a pall of smoke stretching up into outer space, it seemed. The fire was huge. I went outside and watched the orange flames lick their way around the mountains to the north. Before the darkness became too thick, I watched the bow rate bombers discharging their loads on the fire. It was quite a spectacle. I stopped watching the fire about 11 o'clock and went to bed. It did not take me long to drop off to sleep. I was in the middle of a dream when the phone rang. I sat bolt upright in bed and looked at my digital clock. It was exactly 1:30 a.m. I picked up. "Hello," I croaked. "Is Jim there?" my caller asked. I said he must have the wrong number. "Oh," he said and hung up. Some time later, it came out in the newspaper stories that the fire of 22 June 1981, which destroyed 60 homes and blackened some 25,000 acres of forest in Chaparral, was started by an unknown arsonist who had planted a string of bombs alongside the access road to Rector Reservoir. There were 9 bombs, all containing timers. The timers had been set to go off at 1:30 p.m. I didn't know yet about the bus bomb diagram. I was not even to lay eyes on it until 9 months later. But I knew who had set the fire anyway. I just added up the letters of "Is Jim there?" I is 9, S is 19, J is 10, and E is 3. The sum is 112 binary uh, dash 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 dot 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 Morse OH. Okay. Here's the thing about the Atlas Peak fire. Gareth Penn says that the fire was started by 9 mechanical bombs that had been set, that had been spaced out along Rector Reservoir. Okay. Daryl Bresler told me that is not true. Without going into detail, and fire investigators don't like to give out information about how fires were set for obvious reasons. But Daryl told me that what was used to set the Atlas Peak fire were simple devices. Okay, which is to say there weren't any mechanical bombs with timers. They were whatever you would normally think of some combination, let's say, of matchbooks and cigarettes and so forth. I think the cigarette is usually used as a fuse or something like that. I hope I'm not encouraging any arson out there. But that was the first thing. The first thing was that Gareth Penn uh, basically made up the story about what started the fire. Okay, for reasons of his own. Okay. And again, I believe it's because he was one of the conspirators. The second aspect of the Atlas Peak fire is that the Atlas Peak fire was set June 22nd, 1981. If Gareth Penn believed that the Zodiac was essentially that the single actor in the Zodiac murders was Michael O'Hare, okay, and he's the one who set the Atlas Peak fire, what does that tell us? It tells us that Michael O'Hare was in Napa on June 22nd, 1981. And keep in mind, Gareth Penn had already gone to the FBI and talked to them about the guilt of Michael O'Hare, okay? So all Gareth Penn had to do at that point, if he honestly believed that Michael O'Hare set the Atlas Peak fire, was notify the FBI and say, the guy that I told you was a Zodiac killer I believe, set the Atlas Peak fire, which means he is here in California. He is not in. He's not in Greater Boston as we speak. He can't be because it's a 3-hour flight from Napa to Greater Boston. So that in 1981, Michael O'Hare was a professor at MIT from 1971 until 1979. He also worked prior to that, he worked at Arthur D. Little on Stevenson Street in San Francisco from whenever, the late 1960s, 67, 68, until, I said that he was still working at Arthur D. Little when the police agencies were trying to locate the punched hole in the Lake Tahoe card. And they believed that Donald Lass was probably buried in that specific location. Okay. So Michael O'Hare presumably was in March of 1971, was still working at Arthur D. Little on Stevenson Street. As of no, I'm sorry, 1971, not 81. Did I say 81? It's 1971. I noticed that when I'm doing these videos, I meant to say Donald Lass was buried in Portsmouth Square Park in the previous video, and I actually said Joan Webster was buried there. So sometimes I get I misspeak. Okay, but okay. So Michael O'Hare was working at Arthur D. Little through March 1971. Presumably, he began joined the faculty at MIT in the fall semester of 1971. He left MIT in 1979 to work for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and so that in 79 he'd worked for MIT and then worked for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Worked for the Commonwealth for 2 years, and in 1981 was hired by the JFK School. So whether Michael was still working for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in June of 81, or if he had already been hired and was working, was about to start working for the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard for the fall semester in 81. He would have been living in Boston, and I'm assuming he was. I know that when he lived a lot of the time when he was in Boston, he was not living on Abbotsford Road. But I'm assuming that by June of 81, if he wasn't living in Brookline, if he wasn't living on Abbotsford Road, he was living in Greater Boston. Okay, so if he set the Atlas Peak fire in Napa in June of 1981, June 22nd, 1981, it would have taken him a minimum 3 hours to get from there to get to Boston. So all Gareth Penn has to do is notify the FBI, tell them, I believe this guy set that fire. I think that he would have been taken seriously by the FBI because the Atlas Peak fire was taken seriously by law enforcement. That if Gareth honestly had the suspicion that he had about the fire, that his next move would be then to contact the FBI and say, I believe Michael O'Hare committed the, for O'Hare to get back to Boston somehow prior to the FBI agents intercepting him would have been a very tight fit, certainly. If he were able to do it, maybe he would have been able to do it. Maybe if he set the devices for the fire circa 12:30 1 p.m. June 22nd, hops on a transcontinental flight, gets to Boston by, okay, if it's 1 o'clock in Napa, then it's 4 o'clock in Boston. So he gets to Boston by like 7 p.m. that night. So maybe if Gareth doesn't actually suspect him of doing the fire until 1:30 that the next morning, by the time Gareth notifies the FBI, maybe Michael is back in Greater Boston. But my guess is that they could, at the very least, investigate his travel. Was he just on a plane coming from the San Francisco Bay Area in the last 24 hours? And if so, it would be something that could have been investigated. And if it had been investigated, it would be in here, wouldn't it? Wouldn't he be talking about it? Okay. Gareth believes that this terrible crime is committed by the guy that he's accusing of being the Zodiac killer. And he makes no attempt, even though he's already talked to the FBI about Michael O'Hare being the Zodiac killer. He makes no attempt to notify the FBI in the wake of the arson. Okay. And as I've said, there are numerous examples of this throughout. You can go to, I said in an earlier video, you can go to Tom Voigt's original archive message board, which is, as I said, which is probably the greatest message board yet. That's, even though it's from 20 years ago, it's the greatest message board that has ever been devoted to the Zodiac killer case. And look at the threads, particularly the thread that says O'Hare email. I think it's O'Hare email address, and in which the posters talk about the bizarre relationship between Gareth Penn and Michael O'Hare. And here, I was just talking about page 48. Here is page 48, 49. Here is page 50 of Time 17, and it has a different Z408 from the one that is published. As you can see, for example, the Z that I say was changed, I don't know if you can see that, in the third line of the San Francisco Chronicle portion. The first symbol here is Z. In the San Francisco Chronicle portion, it is a half-filled square, okay? So, and we see evidence of tampering by the police in the Vallejo police report that I pointed out. Page 33 is blanked out, okay? You would think the last page in that police report that would be blanked out would be the page that covers August 1st, 1969, which is when they received the mailing, okay? But there's nothing on that page. And I'm assuming that what was on that, this is a major assumption, by the way, isn't it? Isn't this a major assumption? I mean, what Mike Butterfield said about me in his Zodiac Expert series, Ray Grant makes a lot of assumptions. Yeah, that's a major assumption, isn't it? They blanked out that page of all pages, or at least it's that page is devoid of notes, and every other page in that police report has stuff all over it, basically. Okay, so anyway, here we have time 17 in which Gareth Penn does not turn Michael O'Hare in for the Atlas Peak fire. Apparently, doesn't report him. Doesn't report him as a possible suspect in the arson. You know, if I had Michael O'Hare in my sights for a crime, you better believe I would move on it. Okay. Now maybe when all this comes out in the wash, somebody's going to point to something. You know, you could have done this or that, and so in that case would be an example of my overlooking it. But Gareth lies about what started the fire. He doesn't move on Michael O'Hare, even though he suspects O'Hare of having set the fire. And as I said, in the case of the Riverside fire, which is a kind of, you know, again, the primary design element of the Zodiac project is symmetry. Okay, so that would lead you to believe they're not just going to set one fire. They set a fire. They set Kathleen Johns' car on fire. They set Napa on fire. They set, I believe they set Riverside on fire. Okay, that same, essentially 4 days earlier, June 18th, just to localize those two fires. And that resulted in the death of a little boy. Okay, so you have Gareth Penn lying about where a BM9 is in downtown Boston. You can't make that, that can't be a mistake. It has to be something that you intended to do. You only get USGS information in 1987 from the United States Geological Survey. Okay, it's like I say about the weapon in Presidio Heights. A policeman or a police spokesman told the beat reporter that a 38 was used. Okay, the reporter would not make that up. Okay, so somebody told the reporter that the gun that was used was a 38. Okay, Gareth Penn deliberately misidentifies Benchmark 9 in downtown Boston in this book. He deliberately lies about what started out of whole cloth, lies about what started the Atlas Peak fire. He doesn't move on Michael O'Hare when given the opportunity. When given the opportunity to sue Michael O'Hare for holding him up to ridicule in the Washington Monthly, he doesn't sue him. This was in the Washington Monthly article which was sent to Ned DeHaan by Michael O'Hare. A link to it was, and you can go online and look at it. It's called, just Google Confessions of a Non-Serial Killer. And you can add Michael O'Hare's name to that if you want, but it should take you right to that article. Okay, Gareth Penn is held up to ridicule. Michael O'Hare does not mention Ray Grant, although he does mention Ray Grant in the original of the Crackpot Files. And then Mike Butterfield takes the 3 sentences where Michael O'Hare brings me up out of the blue in 1999 out of that article, so that if you go to the current version of the Crackpot Files, those 3 sentences are gone. But if you go back on the Wayback Machine, as I instruct you to do somewhere in an earlier video, those 3 sentences are there, and Michael O'Hare is talking about me. Okay, so you have Gareth Penn as an earlier version of, apparently, an unaltered version of Z408. Michael O'Hare created Bookmarks would come in handy right about now. Oh, okay. I will give you a bonus section just because I'm bad here. This is oops. This is the picture of the model of the MIT Tower in the article in Progressive Architecture, March 1967. I have a copy upstairs. You have 223s down here. Okay, right down here on this page. As you can see, the angle of 117 degrees is the longitude of Riverside. It's also the beginning of Michael O'Hare's Social Security number. It creates a false angle because he has a shadow going here and down here, extending beyond where the stick is leaning against the model of the MIT Tower. It's a false angle. And this is done, I assume that was accomplished by masking tape. But Michael O'Hare creates an artificial angle of 117 degrees. And Michael O'Hare, let me see if I get this. Okay, I don't think I'm going to come up with that. So let's go back here. Again, the title of the article with see if there's, oh no, that wasn't it. Anyway, I've shown the page before. Let me get this. The title of the article is, here it is. Wind whistles through MIT Tower. Wind whistles, W is the 23rd letter of the alphabet. This is Michael O'Hare's maiden journal article. And the first thing out of his mouth is, also, if you blow up room 929 in the MIT Tower, wind will whistle through the MIT Tower. So he's predicting, in 1967, he is predicting something that's going to happen in 1989. Wind whistles, W is the 23rd letter of the alphabet. The first words out of his mouth in his maiden journal article is 2323. And this is the 2323 in the article, just below where the model is. And this is a blow up of that portion of the article showing 223s. Okay? So somebody's going to come back and say, well, that doesn't mean he's the Zodiac killer. No, but again, Ted Bundy met his downfall, not because he was killing anybody, but because he happened to take he was in the habit of doing this, of taking the passenger side seat, front passenger seat of his VW Beetle out and laying it on the back seat. And when this was mentioned in a police report, another policeman said, wait a minute, Carol Durant said that when she was kidnapped, the aggravated kidnapping, the man who kidnapped her had taken the passenger seat out of its normal place in his car. So that was the connection. In other words, Bundy wasn't, his connection to the aggravated kidnapping wasn't that he was trying the same thing with somebody else, or that he was caught red-handed or what have you. It was the fact that the arresting officer thought it was weird that he had taken the seat up off of where it normally went, and that became this incongruous detail that led to Bundy being charged and convicted and put in jail and everything else. Okay, so I don't have video showing Michael O'Hare committing the Zodiac murders. What I do have is a lot of that sort of thing. Things that Michael O'Hare did or didn't do, in the case of like not suing me, for example, that seem otherwise inexplicable. This is for extra credit. This is the Sierra Club card, or the Lake Tahoe card, and we've talked about this before. If you look at if you go online and look at images of this card, you will notice, I may have mentioned this already, the top of the card, in the whole card, in this card, there's a punched hole right there. Okay, in the whole card, there are holes punched in the body of the card. In the Sierra Club card, the author has run the hole puncher along the top of the card. Okay, and this is, I may have mentioned this already. If I have, I apologize. But the idea being that, let me see if I can do this. I already showed you about China, right? The idea being that 180 degrees is a geometric metaphor for a secret identity. If you look at the Roman god Janus, he has this barely looks like a human being, but he draw him. Okay. The Roman god Janus is basically, it's a god with two faces, and the faces are pointing in opposite directions. Okay, so it's 180 degrees. It's an about face. Okay, when we say somebody did a 180, that's what we mean. They were moving in this direction, now they're moving in that direction. Okay, so 180 degrees is a geometric metaphor for a secret identity. If you're a Superman, okay, or you're looking at Superman, if you could see the face that's pointed in the opposite direction, that's Clark Kent. Okay, if you're looking at the Flash, if you could see the face that's pointing away from you, it's Barry Allen. Okay, Green Lantern, Hal Jordan. Okay, this is true, for example, of superheroes, costume superheroes in comic books. It is also true of serial killers. If you're looking at the face of Seattle Ted, you're looking at and people did, friends of Ted Bundy looked at the sketch of Seattle Ted, and they kidded Bundy and said, this guy looks just like you, Ted. Plus, you both drive a tan VW, but nobody, tan VW Beetle. But nobody believed that Ted Bundy could possibly be Seattle Ted. Same thing with the Golden State Killer, okay? You have all those sketches, various sketches that don't particularly look like him of the Golden State Killer. And then when they did the genetic genealogy and they found, they traced it back to Joseph James D'Angelo, his became the face that was pointing away from you. Same thing with BTK and Dennis Rader. Same thing. Same thing with the Son of Sam and David Berkowitz, okay? So 180 degrees is called an about face. It is a geometric metaphor for a secret identity. And that's why the hole punch was run along the edge of the Sierra card, because a straight line is 180 degrees. And then a hole punch was run along the edge of the card. Why? Because the punched hole is 360 degrees. The hole that is actually punched in the body of the card is 360 degrees. But the punched hole that's run along the side is a semicircle. A semicircle is 180 degrees. So they are replacing something that is already 180 degrees, a straight line, with something else that is 180 degrees, a semicircle. Okay? What's a third example of something that's 180 degrees? A triangle. The sequence in the Zodiac Project, as Gareth Penn once told me, was point, angle, triangle. Okay? The point was Riverside. Riverside was the Earth coordinates 117 degrees 23 minutes longitude, 33 degrees 58 minutes latitude. Okay, it's Michael O'Hare at age 23 and the Zodiac. Okay, so that was the point. The angle in was a point in Riverside. The angle in the San Francisco Bay Area was this. It was the Mount Diablo radian. So it's point, angle, triangle. The triangle was the terminus triangle in Greater Boston, the MIT Tower, the BM12 in Chinatown, and the Liberty Mutual building in downtown Boston. So it's point, angle, triangle with the clock face at Lake Tahoe of 1222. And the idea being that instead of coming full circle with the turn, let me see where I am here. I think that's an hour and a half. Anyway, the idea being that instead of coming full circle at the end, the zodiacs come full triangle. You are with the creation of the terminus triangle, the entire project comes 180 degrees because a triangle is 180 degrees. Okay, so once the triangle is the terminus triangle is created, suddenly you can see the face of the zodiac. Okay, and it's Michael O'Hare. So it's a geometric geometric metaphor. It's a geometric conclusion. It's a project that begins with pi, converting to an anagram for zodiac, and it concludes with a triangle. The zodiac project comes full triangle, and we see examples of this in, for example, when in the I think it's in the is it the pen card or the dragon card? No, I'm let's see. Okay, I'm not getting that. The server is not responding. It's I believe it's in. It's either in the pen card or the dragon card. Where he says, if you don't want me to have this blast, you must start wearing buttons. Okay? So blast is 54 by alphabet numbers. The MIT tower is building 54 on the, it's building 54 on the MIT campus. Also, where Donna Lass is buried is benchmark 54. Okay? They originally say that he originally asked that people wear butons, B-U-T-O-N, okay? That is, let's see, 2048, 409, would that be right? Okay, it should be 4096, 2048, 1024, 512, 512, 256, 128, 64, 32, 16, 8, 4. Yeah, I guess so. Okay. So it's, let me make absolutely sure about this. It's 4096 plus 64 plus 32 plus 16 plus 8 plus 4 plus 2. Yeah, 4222. Okay. Buton is 4222. By alphabet numbers, it's second letter plus 21st letter plus 20th letter plus 15th letter plus 14th letter equals 23, 43, 50, 58, 72. Is that right? 29, 49, 70, 72. Okay. 4222 by Morse code to binary, and by alphabet numbers, Buton is 72. That is, let me see what the okay. Okay, the green, also called the green building, and let me see if I can. Let me see if I can get an exact. Okay, green building, MIT. Let me see if they have the. They don't. They don't. They're not listing the exact USGS coordinates. Unfortunately, I wanted to make that point, but let's see. First LL letter. Okay, I don't see it. Anyway, the coordinates, the USGS coordinates of the MIT tower are, they are not, the latitude is 4222. Okay, the longitude is in the 71-degree area. This is actually 72. Buton is about as close as you could have gotten to getting the latitude, which is 42 degrees 22 minutes, and the longitude, which is 71 degrees and change. This is 72 in a single word. That's probably as close as you could have come. So the reason that the Zodiac killer keeps asking people to wear buttons and originally said Buton is because that word signifies the building 54. It signifies the MIT tower. So that may be minutia as far as the Zodiac event. It's another example of them suggesting things that are actually very slight fudges. In the case of Buton, it isn't quite a perfect word. It's as close as they could come to suggesting the specific MIT tower with one word. It's Buton. Okay, The word Buton essentially tells you the location of where they're going to have the blast, and the word blast is 54. So that was the idea. Anyway, I probably where are we at? We're almost at. Are we at 2 hours yet? Pretty close to it, probably. Okay. Um. Anyway, that covers some more. I did not get to. I probably I'm going to do Joan Webster as a separate video. I'm getting my. By the time you next see me, I will have got my throat injections. So we'll see whether I can actually talk or not. My voice isn't. All things considered, my voice isn't that bad right now. So we'll see. It won't be immediately after the injections. It won't be improved. It usually takes a week or two for it to be reasonably close to normal. Anyway, a lot of this is just elaboration of things I've talked about before. Um, but essentially, I haven't gone through the letters one by one. Essentially, everything that is in the letters pertains to some aspect of the Zodiac project. It isn't there, contrary to popular belief on Zodiac Killer message boards. What is in the letters is not any kind of psychoanalyzable, emotional thing. It's not the Zodiac Killer getting mad because they solved Z408, early, or being upset with the police for one thing or another, or getting even, or anything like that. Basically, what the letters are there for is to do things like this: is to suggest aspects of what the project was and where it was going, and to do that kind of like in a running commentary. And if you the other thing is, if you look at the Zodiac Killer letters, you will notice that pretty much with every letter that was written, they were introducing some new element. Okay, which is why I laugh at people. Richard Grinnell is an example, unfortunately, who keep putting forth hoax letters as this was written by the Zodiacer. That would, if the Zodiac were writing just straight hoax letters, which copied what the previous letter said, just to make the point, here, I can write another letter to you. That would defeat the whole purpose of writing the letters in the first place, which is to gradually give information about what they were doing and what the Zodiac Project was about, and just like piecemeal. And in some cases, the information was very structurally set up, like Me 37, for example, was set up to come late in the sequence because they wanted the Me 37 to look like a victim scorecard, and they wanted people to make that assumption, which people did. Okay, and the Zodiac Killers, in terms of their accuracy at being able to predict how people would respond to the information they were giving out, were pretty close to 100%. They were able to fool people over and over and over again with what they were putting out. But if you look at the letters, you will notice that there isn't any kind of continuous format in the letters. You have pretty much every letter. You had the confession letter, which was typed. You had the loose leaf letters, which were freehand. You had the Z408 cover letters, which included the three portions of the cryptogram. You had then the Zodiac debut of Zodiac letter in August of 1969. October 13th, you had the first of the shirt swatches. With November 8th, you had the first greeting card. With November 9th, you had, I believe, the first bomb diagram. The December 20th, the Dear Melvin letter was the first offhand, I can think it's the first direct paraphrasing of what a previous serial killer did. William Hirons, if he was the lipstick killer, taking this confessional tone, which was obviously false because the next letter just went back to what his normal snarky tone was. In the April 20th letter, you had the cipher Z13. The dragon card of April 20th was another greeting card. But pretty much throughout the sequence of letters, you had the introduction of original material or original elements, um, so that the letters were not sent just for the sake of keeping up a correspondence with the authorities and with the public. They were sent to add to the information that had been sent earlier, and so I think we're pretty darn close to. Is that? Oh, it's 150. That's pretty close. That's close enough, probably, I guess, to 2 hours. So anyway, all of this is just to reiterate some of what I've said earlier, and to talk a little bit about the Atlas Peak fire, and probably in my next video will be about Joan Webster, and I'll talk about what was going on and more of what was going on in Greater Boston, and about Leonard Parody, the unfortunate person, Leonard Paradiso. That's the other thing, is that is if you're doing something like this. Woody Allen made a movie about a guy who is I think, a philosophy professor, and he ends up committing a murder, and he murders somebody who's a really bad person. But the idea is, and he's in cahoots with Emma Stone, who's maybe my favorite actress, and I think it's Joaquin Phoenix is the protagonist. But the idea is that he commits this murder for philosophical reasons, for good. In effect, he kills a person who's a bad person. But the problem is that another innocent person is then accused of the crime, and then he is put in a situation where somebody is going to be the unforeseen victim of what he did, even though the direct victim basically deserved what he got. Okay, so in the case of the Joan Webster abduction and murder, unfortunately, Leonard Paradiso, who I don't think ever killed anybody, ends up being the I had a run in with whoever the Suffolk County DA at the time was, whose name escapes me at the moment, but I'm sure it's in my books. I will discuss it in the next video. Anyway, that pretty much. Are we at? Okay, well, we'll hit 2 hours, so it'll be your typical Ray Grant video with lots of dead air, and so but anyway, the all of this is to say that the basically everything that the Zodiac killers did, not just the ciphers, but what was in the letters, and and that should be obvious. It seems to me it should be obvious when you look at things like the Halloween card, and the Hole card, and the Sierra Club card, that basically everything that they were sending to the Chronicle and to the other newspapers contained information about them. That, in other words, that it added to the puzzle. Okay, and for that reason, and the ciphers themselves, at least Z408 and Z340, in terms of the ciphertext converting to a plain text in English, was basically fool's gold. It was basically there, and you see that in the original solution to Z408. I like killing people because it's so much fun. It's more fun than killing wild game in the forest. It's okay. And even with the confession letter, it's this kind of very melodramatic presentation that really doesn't tell you a heck of a lot, and actually misdirects you in terms of who the people who are doing this really were. Uh, the actual gold was in the letters, and to a large extent in the crimes themselves. So anyway, I will see if it'll be interesting to see if I can do a video tomorrow evening after I get the injections. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching the video, and I will. We're over 2 hours now. Okay, all right. Thanks very much for watching. I will talk to you soon.